Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Hey there, welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. So glad that you've joined me for this particular episode. I want to talk about something that's been disturbing me for a while and something that I think we need to be concerned about in the Western Hemisphere. I've been saying for a long time that the Trump distortion factor, the preoccupation our whole culture has with the latest Trump happenings, often distracts us from more important events going on in the world. Now, I live in D.C. and I work in D.C. about half my life, and I understand that what's happening in D.C. is important. I understand that this is a disruptive presidency. I understand people want to impeach him. I understand what's going on. I will say, though, not everything that happens every single day with every twitch of Trump's nose is the central event of the universe. And while we're all preoccupied with that, and that captures the headlines and a lot of the news attention, a lot of the money and the reporting and the systems of information dispersal, I want to say at the same time that there are other things going on that are unbelievably important. Let me tell you one of those that happened just this last week. Mike Pompeo, our Secretary of State in the United States, announced that Vladimir Putin, who of course is the head of the Russian Federation, had actually encouraged Nicolás Maduro, who's the socialist president of Venezuela, to stay in office. Now, the U.S. had been backing Juan Guaido, who is elected, who is an opposition leader, who is a man that the U.S. feels will be better than this socialist leader Maduro, who's basically in the vein of Hugo Chavez from some years ago. Some of you will remember him, the man who really, I think, destroyed Venezuela and has now passed from the scene. He's passed from this life, too. He's dead. But we found out that the Russian premier decided to inform Maduro that he should stay in office, this socialist leader of Venezuela, and to not allow the democratically elected Guaido to take office. That's the preference of the United States. Now, what that means is that the head of Russia, basically, has intervened in our hemisphere in a matter in South America, in a high petroleum-producing nation, and is urging a socialist leader to stay in office. This man was slated to resign and head to Cuba. The arrangements had been made. Putin stuck his nose in it and urged this man to stay. Now, I want to tell you that some years ago, I was traveling around South America with some business people. I was on their lovely jet, and one of them was a Venezuelan petroleum executive. He was a fine man, an elegant man, well-spoken, had a beautiful wife who was, I believe, an MD. Bev and I were with them flying around and doing some events. And this man told me of the beauty of his country. He told me of what Venezuela had been like and how equitable it had been and how prosperous it had been and the culture of it and how it was emerging in the world and how there was greater democracy and prosperity for everybody. And there were flaws. Of course, there are going to be flaws. Every nation has flaws. Every nation has challenges. Every nation has inequities. But he was moved to tears himself. I was moved. Everybody on the plane, everybody at these events, we traveled around as a team for a while, just moved by what Venezuela had been. But at the time, Hugo Chavez was in charge, and he was taking Venezuela into the socialist hell that all socialist leaders take their nations into. I mean, history is very clear about these lessons. And so now we've got this dictator named Maduro, who's a socialist crazy man, violent, absolutely violent. People were killed in the streets this past week. And there's tremendous opposition from the democratically elected Juan Guaido, but now you've got basically fights in the streets. You've got starvation. You've got economic turmoil. You've got the military starting to split down the center. You got the courts dysfunctional. You have nothing close to democracy in a free society. And of course, the petroleum is dropping off to a trickle. So this is a country in deep trouble. I was in Peru not too many years ago. I was there during the inauguration of a new president, and there was a Hugo Chavez party in Peru that was, exerting its strength. had influenced the elections. I did an event for politicians there. Members of the Chavez party showed up and, asked me questions and kind of tried to show off amongst all the politicians in the room. And you could just feel this socialist reach, this socialist claw, I would call it, reaching across South America. So we need to be aware of what's going on beyond just what's the latest happenings with Trump. The fact is that the head of Russia has reached into our hemisphere and has urged a socialist leader to stay in office when he was supposed to leave and go to Cuba, and the democratically elected leader of that country now is standing in the streets with a megaphone calling for this man to resign. Putin basically put the middle finger in the face, sorry to express it that way, of the United States, has exerted himself here in this hemisphere in a new way, not just in Cuba, which we expect and which has been going on for decades, but now in a new way. We got new tensions, and I think we're seeing some new aspirations, maybe some old aspirations rekindled, of the Russian Empire. We should be very, very careful about this. We've come to missile crises before because of tensions in our hemisphere with Russia. We know that Putin sees himself as a new czar. We know that he's reaching into our hemisphere. We know that he believes the U.S. is weakened during a Trump administration and that nobody's really paying attention, not the press, not the State Department. I'm grateful that Mike Pompeo actually sounded the alarm on this, but I'm not sure that anyone's listening. So let's pay attention. Let's be careful. Many of you who listen to this podcast work in government. Let's not miss this. I know it was in the press and everybody's going tisk, 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 but what are we actually doing? And how are we checking Russian encroachment into the Western Hemisphere? That's part of our role as the United States, and it's something we should be very, very aware of. Trump will eventually leave office this election or the next. He's not the center of the universe. He's not the center of the American experience. But we've been battling communism for the better part of, for more than 100 years. And we'd better be ready for a resurgence of it in our Western Hemisphere, and especially if we're going to continue to be distracted by the latest Trump events in Washington, D.C. There's more to the world than that. There's more happening, and there are greater threats than what's happening with Barr and Mueller and all of the usual stuff. Let's be vigilant. That's the price of freedom.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.